Welcome to Lived In, a podcast series by Hemby Home Co. Lived In is all about interior styling for the ordinary home. If you live in an ordinary house on an average street and you love design, this podcast is for you. Many of us long to infuse the places in which we dwell with both style and livability, but we also have to stick to realistic budgets. What does it look like to live in a space that transitions with you as life does? How do you build equity while creating a space that truly feels like home? And what can you do to make a space yours when it doesn't belong to you? Join me, Femi, a realtor, content manager, and interior advisor, and let's find out. Hi guys, today I am recording from my son's bedroom, and I have a wonderful guest from across the pond recording with me today. And I feel extremely honored that she would even join me on the podcast at this point, because she's a very busy lady and much in demand. Some of you may know her by her Instagram handle at the Otto House. She is the DIY blogger behind the website, the Otto House, Hannah Otto. And over the last few years, I don't know exactly how many, but we'll get into that in the interview, she has kind of renovated houses, taken them from fairly rundown or unloved to these really colourful, warm, really lived in spaces. And I love the idea of having Hannah on the podcast because Hannah is one of the most authentic and honest DIY bloggers that you probably ever come across. She's one of the few people who I know that talks about what things actually cost. She shows her house when it's messy, which I struggle with a lot, even talking about lived in. And she's not pretending to be anything that she's not. She's just really straightforward. That said, the spaces that she creates are absolutely beautiful. And I will make sure that at the end of this episode, you're able to find the links to her handle, her website, and just other projects that she's been involved in. But without further ado, hello, Hannah. Welcome to Lived In.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me, and what an intro. Wow. Thank you.
It is a massive joy to be able to record with you. And as I told you right before we hit record, one of the things I like to do is ask guests to describe themselves in just one word. So I'll go with my word for you. It's not a glamorous word, but I think it describes you really well, and it's just incredibly hardworking. If any of you follow Hannah on Instagram, the process that I've been most intrigued by has been the shower renovation in your current house, where you found, was it 2 hidden showers? Was it one behind the wall?
It was one hidden shower, and then behind the shower there was another sort of layer of tiles with a mirror. So it's sort of, yeah, a hidden shower and then a hidden mirror space. Very strange.
Very strange. But Hannah literally rolls her sleeves up. I think I mentioned in the episode on modest makeovers that I'm not a DIYer, and I very much recognize that. So people like Hannah really challenge me and impress me, and I aspire to be like you, but I also know that I'm not made for it. So just thank you for being an inspiration, but a down-to-earth one at the same time.
That's okay.
What one word would you use to describe yourself?
So when you said that, when you asked me this question, the first thing I thought of was also really not glamorous, and it was tired, which kind of links in with your hardworking one, I guess.
Does.
But no, if I was to go for a more positive one, but maybe less honest, it would be resourceful, I would say. That would probably be my one word.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that kind of reflects where I'm at, just always trying to make things happen, which, yeah, ties in with your word as well. So.
You're extremely resourceful. I actually saw, I think, a reel that you posted a week or two ago, and it was some kind of kitchen, I don't even know if you call them kitchen hacks, but really small ways to improve the functionality of your kitchen and the feel of your kitchen. And I've been trying to work out how to add a skirt over my dishwasher for the last week since seeing that reel. I'm not sure my husband would go for it, but we have really ugly black appliances in our kitchen,
Yeah.
and they're so great on the inside and they work so well. It's not really worth spending the money to replace them. But if I could hide the ugly black dishwasher with a skirt, I'm like, oh, that might be a way forward. So,
Yeah.
anyway, thanks for
Yeah.
your resourcefulness.
No, that's
It
okay. I
inspires me.
actually find it easier sometimes because I've never had like a huge budget to completely redo spaces from scratch. It's always a case of working with what you've got, and sometimes I actually find that easier. If I have a blank canvas, it can be a bit daunting, but where you've got a space
Mm,
already and you've got, okay, these are the things we have to keep because we can't afford to replace them, or they've just got to stay there. These are the things that we can change, and then it's working out ways of making what you've got work. And I actually find that often easier and more enjoyable. It's more rewarding
mm,
because it's, yeah, you're making do with what you've got. You're not like excessively being wasteful. And it forces you to be really creative, more so I think than if you're just starting from scratch. So yeah, definitely
yeah.
that is something that I quite enjoy doing, like finding solutions for those sort of puzzles in your home that you can't actually just do anything about, but you
Hmm.
don't really like.
Does that mean that you would never buy or that you would never build your own house?
Um, yeah, I think I wouldn't. I think that would be one step too far for my husband. Also, I do prefer older properties. So even if I had free reign and could build it myself, I think I would still always rather go for an older property and renovate it rather than
Hmm.
something new. Yeah.
Oh, I have so many questions I want to jump into, but I feel like I have to start people off at the very beginning, which is kind of your introduction to design, I guess, as a category or as a hobby or an interest. And I think that this is right. But I think you started off with making curtains. Is that right?
I did. So right at the very beginning, I actually went to university to do interior design. Um, but I quit after a term and came back home because
That's okay.
I just didn't like the course. I loved being away. I loved being, at university, but the course wasn't right. It was very architectural based. It was very much like
Mm,
technical, and I just knew that wasn't really up my street. So I cut my losses and came home, and I got a job at Laura Ashley, which is it's doesn't run anymore, but it's a very old fashioned store in the UK, quite traditional English country vibe. And I was working in their interiors department. But then, yeah, when I got married, I became a curtain maker, and that was sort of just a job to make ends meet. I was
mm,
living away from home then, obviously with my husband, and needed to pay the bills. But that kind of turned into something more as I started my own business doing that. So I've always done creative things, and I've always sort of been in the sphere of home interiors, whether it would be in retail or obviously making curtains. And then I gave that up when I started having children, and that's when we kind of got into a position of buying our own home. And then, yeah, I guess then it kind of all that creativity went into the house, and that's kind of grown from there. I guess as we're now in our third renovation. So yeah, it's been quite busy doing it, but I guess yeah, we've sort of learned a lot along the way. And like everyone, I started using Instagram when the filters were really dodgy, and it was just people sharing like very different stuff to what it is now. And I just enjoyed being connecting with other people around the country when I was stuck at home with a baby, seeing what creative things they were up to. And so that's obviously
yeah.
evolved into something else now. That's part of um, my job on social media and sharing like the house on there and our projects on there. So it's evolved. It's but yeah, I don't have any formal training or anything. I've just lived lots of lived experience, I guess.
Yeah. my thing of the week this week is probably going to make me an object of ridicule, and I am completely okay with that. It is the Huey, I think that's how you say it, the Huey toilet brush from the MoMA design store, or the Museum of Modern Art design store. It is outrageously priced for being what it is, which is, again, a toilet brush. It's $129 if you're not a member. If you are a member, it's $116. But this is a really nice wall-mounted toilet brush. So, you know, I mean, there's a price for good design and quality products, and so maybe you can justify it that way. I know that this is just not something realistically I will probably ever own unless I buy it and don't tell my husband. Because you know what you can do with $129? A heck of a lot. Regardless, this is the coolest toilet brush I have absolutely ever seen in my life, and it comes in 2 colorways. You can get it in blue and yellow, or you can get it in white. And I am considering it. I might ask for it for Christmas. Anyway, you can find the link to that and some links to some other really nice toilet brushes in the show notes. All right, that's it. Let's get back to the episode. Let's get into, I guess, your first house, because I'm assuming that's where you first started doing the DIYs, because it was yours. What was that house like when you bought it?
So it was a Victorian terrace. It was sort of built in the early 1900s. It was tiny, pretty much a 2 up, 2 down. And it was actually in relatively good condition considering its age, and it had an elderly owner beforehand. So it was mainly just aesthetics. We had to sort of strip a few walls back because of damp, and like we had to replaster everywhere and put new bathroom in. But on the whole, it was quite a good introduction to renovation because we weren't doing anything structural. We weren't doing anything hugely overwhelming. So it was sort of a good first step. We were there 3 years, and we had 2 children there that were under 2. So it was also, I guess, governed by our time restraints as well, and our money. We went there with, you know, we didn't have a huge budget for renovating. So yeah, we mainly just changed it aesthetically and updated it sort of to this century.
It's funny that you're like, yeah, we didn't do any huge DIYs, but you said you put in a bathroom, and to me, that is a huge DIY.
Yeah. Well, we
I
didn't
said to
do
you
that
earlier that
ourselves.
there you go.
Yeah. It's
But you
about
did paint.
delegating,
I'm
isn't
trying to
it?
remember. Yes. And that's actually a question I was going to ask you, which was how do you decide, or how, and it's probably shifted over time as your experience and your level of comfort with different projects has grown. But how did you decide early on, like, this is something I can do myself versus this is something that we need to delegate because there's no way I can do it myself?
Absolutely. So if we can do it ourselves, we will do it. So anything that takes a long time but isn't very skilled, we will do ourselves. So for instance, in the first home, like the whole house was covered in wallpaper from like top to bottom. So,
Mm,
you know, obviously we did all of that. We did all the decorating. We hired sanding machines and sanded all the wooden floors. But the skilled things like electrics, plumbing, we will get people in because we don't want to mess around with that.
yeah.
In the second house that we renovated and the one we're in currently, we did also pay for decorators to do our kids' rooms. I think it was a priority for us to have those done really quickly because it does take us a long time to get stuff done. I've always just done the
Hmm.
DIY while my kids have been while the babies have been napping. So it's very, 1 hour a day sort of thing. So it takes ages. And I just wanted the kids to be as have the least amount of disruption as possible. So we did pay for decorators to
Yeah.
do their rooms. But on the whole, it's about pulling in contacts. So if we know anyone that can help us or give us advice and then help us do it, or paying people to do the things that we just know we can't do. But like you said, as the years have gone on, there has been more that I've done myself. And also, as our budget has been stretched further in this house because it's bigger and needs more work, we've had to do stuff
Yeah.
by ourselves that we probably wouldn't really want to do. But that's just, that's where we're at the minute. So yeah, it's definitely, we just do as much as we can by ourselves.
Yeah.
And then if it's beyond our skill set, we'll get someone else in.
So when you were sanding the floors in the old house and when you were stripping the wallpaper, those were things that you hadn't done before. Where did you figure out how to do those? Did you have people kind of, as you say, that had done it? Was it like a calling my dad type thing, or was it you on YouTube? When did you buy that house? How long ago was that?
So the first house we bought in 2015. Yeah, so 8 years ago. We were there for 3 years. But we finished the house sort of within 2 years, and then we had it put it on the market, and it took a little while to sell. And we tend to learn just via YouTube, really. I'm on Instagram a lot, and see other DIY accounts, follow them, pick up tips along the way. So it's a combination. My brother-in-law is also a builder. He doesn't live near us, but he is a builder. So we will also message him, ring him, and say, what do we need to do with this? And every now and then in this house, he's sort of come down a few times and helped us with some bigger jobs. And I'm aware that a lot of people don't have that privilege. And it can be quite daunting. If you're chatting to tradesmen, they'll all tell you different things, different ways of fixing things, different prices, different materials that you need. So it can be quite daunting. But yeah, it's definitely just a range of things and just picking it up. So I just give things a go, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I try again. So definitely, I find it tricky to really sit down and research something. I learn more through just like doing. So yeah, definitely just pick stuff up as we go along, I think.
We're currently in the first house that we've owned, and something I was really excited about initially was like, great, now I actually get to put my stamp on it. I can paint the walls and change the flooring and rip things out and that kind of thing. But then that excitement was really quickly replaced by panic because I was like, well, if we change something and it doesn't look good, well, one, we're devaluing our house, but two, then we're responsible, and the cost of replacing it is then an extra cost. So how did you overcome the hurdle of like, well, we can do these things, and I guess maybe to a certain extent stripping the wallpaper is not probably going to really massively devalue your house if you do it wrong, if you can even do it wrong. And same with sanding the floor. But were there any things that you were nervous about tackling in that first house, or that went kind of a different way than you'd hoped, that you then had to kind of remedy?
It went pretty well actually with the first house. We were, like I said, we didn't have much of a budget, so we did actually just decorate all the walls white, and then we added colour in with all the
Mm.
accessories and the woodwork. So I love built-in woodwork.
Yes.
I love anything bespoke like that, just to make the most of the space that you have, and I'll always paint it fun colours. And I've done that in all our houses. So that sort of thing is like, I kind of feel like if people were looking to buy the house from us, it probably wouldn't put them off too much, because it's quite an easy fix for them to do. We did paint the back of our house pink in the
Yeah.
first house, and the front door bright yellow, which our neighbour was like, that's a bit of a joyful colour, when you think you really don't like it, but you're trying to be
Yes.
polite. But anyway, the people who bought it have still got the door that colour. So 6-7 years on, so that's nice. But there's not been anything that we've done drastic that's been too drastic, I think, that's put people off buying our homes. We've definitely not gone over anything to sell.
Yeah.
So when it comes to selling, it's more just been a case of fixing sort of snag list stuff rather than redoing something that we've done previously. So we haven't
Yes.
had too much of a problem, because I know some people say, "Oh, just paint your house neutral colours to sell it," but that's not really been our experience yet. But like I said, we do tend to keep the walls quite neutral, so maybe we're like on the edge of being acceptable enough for people to kind of imagine the house as they would like it, maybe.
Um, on that first one, and we don't necessarily have to get into numbers on that one. Maybe we could do that with house number two. But do you feel like for the amount that you invested in that house, that you were able to get your return when you went to sell, even if it did take a while to sell?
Yeah, so that was actually our best investment, the first house. Um, I'm happy to talk numbers. We bought it for £310,000 as I'm in the UK, and we sold it 3 years later for 375. So we made
Oh wow.
65k on it, but we only spent 8,000 on the renovation. So we made a good little parcel of money on that one, which obviously then went into renovating our second home. And
Yeah.
also we bought a family car. So we took like the cash out.
Necessary.
Yeah, very boring, but
Yeah.
we needed one. So we took out the cash from the profit that we'd made, and we used that as like to get us going on the renovation of our second home. And like I said, bought a big car to fit our family. So yeah, on the second home, we didn't actually stretch ourselves too much. We moved to a cheaper area. It was still in the city that we were in, but it
Mm,
was a cheaper. It was like on the edge of a council estate, and
yeah.
which we loved living there, and we just got more for our money. And then obviously we had like
Yeah.
the money left over from the sale of our first house to then go into renovating the second house. So it was
Yeah.
nice to have a bit more of a budget for the second house, and we actually paid someone to sand the floors in our second house because we could
Yeah.
afford to delegate a bit more, but it was also a bigger project, so there was still more for us to do, but it meant we could sort of, yeah, it made it a bit more achievable, having that money. But we are very privileged to live in an area where the house prices do tend to just rise. Um,
Yeah.
so there is obviously the side where we have renovated a house and made it livable for someone to just walk right in and not have to do anything. So the value goes up, but it also just is a bit to do with where you live as well, isn't it? So yeah,
Yeah.
we've done all right.
Definitely.
It's hard work, but it has paid off, thankfully.
So on your second house, was that similar in size to the first one? Did you only have the two girls at that point?
Yeah,
Or did you have three?
when we moved in, we had two girls. By the time we moved out, we had a third. So we were at the second house just for 2 years. We bought that one for 390 and sold it 2 years
Okay.
later for 450. So
That's
yeah,
pretty good too.
so yeah, it was a similar sort of profit margin, but just in 2 years rather than three. Although we spent a lot more on the renovation for that one. So it was a 3-bedroom house, um, much bigger garden with a garage, a big driveway. So much more of a family home. It was still attached,
Mm.
semi-detached, but it was a lovely 1930s house. Had really nice character. I really liked that house, and we would still be there actually if we could have afforded to extend it. But we just felt like it got a bit too small for
Mm.
us when our son came along. Um, we loved the area, and in fact the people who bought it from us have extended sideways and upwards. They've done all the things we'd have loved to have done, but we didn't have the money for it. It
Yeah.
worked out better for us to move somewhere bigger than to put an extension on.
What did you like about the second house? As I'm asking because when I'm showing people houses as a realtor, I am pretty much always pointing out certain things to them that are, you can't really change where the house is, so pay attention to where it is. You can't really change. I mean, you can change architecturally things in the home, but that gets really pricey. So I'm always kind of encouraging people, if you want a light space, look for a house that has lots of windows. Don't go for something that's dark. So what were the things that kind of drew you towards that second house?
Absolutely, it was things like the light, the original features. It had lovely picture rails. It had lovely
Mm,
fireplaces. It had original wood floor, which if anyone who follows me knows, I do not have that in the house we're in now, even though the house we're in now is 400 years old. A lot of the original
That's
features have been
wild.
stripped out. So I really miss the higher ceilings, and just the vibe of 1930s houses. I just really enjoy.
Mm.
And I think they have character, but they're also a blank canvas, if that's possible. This house that we're in now is a
Yep.
thatch cottage. It's quite traditional English cottage on the outside, but on the inside, we've got lots of exposed beams, which is character, but it's more like in your face character. So I found it harder to decorate
Mm.
because you're really having to work with the features rather than in 1930s homes, and even Victorian or Edwardian homes, they tend to, the features are there and they're beautiful, but they're a bit more subtle. So you can make them work with
Yeah.
like mid-century interior style. You can make them work with a more modern style, or you can keep like a more traditional style. Whereas I have found this house a lot harder to find my style and find what works, because the rooms are darker, and the rooms
Yep.
are just weird. They're very wonky. The shapes of the rooms are just not standard. There's a lot of weird stuff going on. You've got loads of beams, and it's fun and quirky, but it definitely gives you more challenges, I think, design wise. So I sometimes just miss the simplicity of the other house. But I do really like this house as well. It's just taken a while to get to find my feet, I guess.
Yes. I think it's funny because that you say that, because when I look at your house, I'm like, Hannah's living my dream. Um, I would love to live in a cottage right on the edge of a town. Like, that's just like my dream now. Um, and so, kind of, it's interesting to hear that there are actually more challenges around decorating in that kind of space versus the less romantic, maybe 1930s Edwardian. What were the main projects in the second house that you did? And which ones did you do yourself and which ones, I know you said you did the kids' rooms and the sanding the floors, those were outsourced. But
Yeah.
which projects did you do yourself and which ones did you get help with?
So we knocked a wall down, and that is something we outsourced. That was probably one of the bigger projects. Was reinstating some of the fireplaces that had been boarded up, and
Mm,
we opened up the kitchen living room to make one big room, and we had like the whole house replastered, and we had to do a bit of work on the electrics. But apart from that, we did all the decorating, and we did a lot of work in the garden. It was during COVID, and so we had a lot of time at home, and we were really grateful after like the first 6 weeks of like sheer shock and panic, which I think everyone went through, especially when you had two children. Um, we
yes.
kind of actually got into a groove and started working on the garden, and that was really rewarding, and for me was actually really helped me during that time, because I just was really struggling, obviously trying to homeschool the kids and not seeing everyone. Like, it was all, obviously it was horrible for everyone, so we were very grateful to have the garden to focus on. So we did all of that ourselves, and we did a lot of work in the kitchen and the bathrooms. Um, and yeah, we did it. We got a new driveway as well, because the front drive was just a garden, so we turned it into a driveway. So there was definitely much bigger projects, and we outsourced quite a lot. But most people, if you have renovated before, even if you're not doing the work, there's still a lot to be done. You feel like you're moving furniture
Mm-hmm.
from one room to another all the time just to make space for whatever work's happening. There's lots of
Yep.
sourcing products, finding the things that the tradesmen need, as well as obviously just keeping the house clean and livable while you're there, and then doing all the painting and the making curtains and all of that bit at the end, tiling. There's
Oh, God bless
definitely,
you.
yeah, there's a lot to be done. But we did it quickly because we did have that pot of money from from the first house. So we were able to quickly, and like I said,
Yeah.
we put that house on the market, and that sold in a week to someone who'd actually seen my house on
Wow.
Instagram.
That's amazing.
So they hadn't even viewed the house.
That's really cool.
They'd just seen it online and put an offer in without one of them viewing it. So yeah.
What do you feel like you made any choices in the new house or the second house that you wouldn't have made in the first house? How did your style kind of evolve? And I know you went from 2 kids to 3 kids also while in that house. I'm wondering if that kind of informed any of your choices.
I think our style definitely evolved, and I got a bit more brave, a bit more courageous, I think, with my choices
Hmm.
in the second house as we'd done it before. And we had also planned on staying there for a lot longer. It's something that all our friends joke about. We always say, "Oh, we'll be at this house for 10 years," and then we end up moving. So we were planning on being there for longer. So I wasn't thinking at all about reselling when we made choices. So, like, we had a pink fireplace with yellow tiles, which I loved.
Yes.
And there were definitely things that we were braver with as it was second time round. But I think it wasn't a huge departure from what we did first time round. It was just, like you said, more evolving rather than just completely leaving something behind. But yeah, I
Hmm.
mean, like anyone with growing family, it becomes about storage and how to make toys disappear in a stylish way, where to put them,
Yeah.
and all that kind of thing. So
Yes.
I really feel quite strongly about adult spaces being adult spaces, but they've got to work for the kids during the
Hmm.
day. Like, we've never had a playroom or anything, so our kids' toys have always been in the living room, which is absolutely fine. It's their living room too. But in the evening, I want to be able to
Right.
tidy everything away. So I'm all for clever storage, and having everything has to have a home and everything has to be away in the evening, because I don't want to sit there and look at plastic toys. So it's about just being clever, isn't it, with the space that you've got, which is one of the reasons why I really like bespoke furniture, because it gets you the
Hmm.
space, and like you can just get exactly what you need to suit your what you need at that point. So yeah.
And it's I love that you mentioned furniture because I remember I want to say fairly early on, even probably in your first house, following you and seeing that you were like the queen of Facebook Marketplace before anybody else was into Facebook Marketplace. I feel like you were always finding things that maybe other people just overlooked, or yeah, I don't know. Either they overlooked them or they just people weren't looking at Facebook until they didn't see them. But you were one of the first people I noticed. Maybe that's just me. Maybe that's not your innovation. Maybe it's just me being slow. But you were one of the first people I noticed who would find things online and upcycle them and just make them better, but actually make them better. And so it's interesting too that you mentioned bespoke furniture because my thought immediately when I hear the word bespoke furniture is that it's going to be really expensive and I can't do it. So I'm very curious about kind of how you've integrated that, or if you kind of tend to do a mixture of, well, I do the Facebook marketplace and then I do bespoke furniture. Kind of what's your approach when it comes to furnishing?
Yeah, it's absolutely that. It is all about finding budget options, which then leaves you money for more expensive options where you need it. So if I'm getting a TV cabinet or a sideboard, I don't need to get that new. I can get that second hand, and actually, I prefer the look
Hmm.
of old solid wood. Um, and I don't particularly love new furniture. So
Hmm.
I will save money on that, and then that leaves more money in the budget for some bespoke carpentry for an awkward corner or an alcove, which we need to put storage in. We've also been quite lucky. I think we found a carpenter that is very reasonably priced. He's actually someone I used to work with when I was waiting at a pub, and he used to be a waiter in the evenings as well to make ends meet. And so we worked together for a few years, and so he was a good friend, and he was a carpenter during the day. And actually, I don't know if he gave me mates rates or not, but he was very reasonably priced, and he's done bespoke furniture in all of our houses now. So that has helped, and appreciate that not everyone would have access to that. I think the cost of it has gone up a lot in the last few years since COVID, because just the cost of material, the cost of wood has soared. It has in the UK anyway. I don't know if it has in the US. But yeah, I love Facebook Marketplace. I really like getting old furniture. I think when you've got kids that are going to bash and mark furniture anyway, it's less obvious if it's already bashed and marked. If you get old pieces of wood that have already got stories to tell, then I just think, well, that's fine. We'll just add to those stories and add to the character. So I definitely advocate that as an option. I think it does require time though. You have to be on it all the time, checking it daily, and you also have to make decisions really quickly, which is something that I'm pretty good at. So I'm very decisive, and I'm also quite impulsive. So I will just, if I see something, I'll just message them straight away and be like, yeah, I can come and pick it up now. I also don't really consult anyone on it. It is like my decision, obviously within reason, but it's never anything that expensive, so it'll be like, well, this is something neat, I'm going to go and get it. And because of the way in which my husband and I work, when it comes to design stuff, he doesn't get involved, so I don't need to say to him, do you like this bit of furniture? I'll just get it. And that helps, because if you're slow, you just miss it. Anything good just goes, doesn't it, within hours. So you have to be really quick, and occasionally that means I'll end up with a piece that I'm like, I'll pick it up and bring it home, and then I'll be like, oh no, this is not right. But then you can just put it back on there and sell it again. It's not, it's not a huge biggie.
Do you have any tips? So obviously you said you kind of have to be on it all the time and you have to be quick. Do you have any tips for people when it comes to buying something off a Facebook Marketplace that could help them choose items better?
So I think just being aware of what you're looking for and not getting drawn in. Whilst I say you've got to be quick, sometimes you can be too excited by the find to then think about it clearly. So, and that happens as well when you buy things at auction. Before I had kids, I used to buy loads of things at auction houses, which is much more old fashioned, like in person, with the paddle and everything. And you have to be careful not to get caught up in the moment, especially when it comes to pricing, whether something's appropriate. But on Facebook Marketplace, absolutely, I will save anything that I like the look of, even if it's not in the area that I'm in, or it's out of my price range. Because what happens with Facebook is the algorithm will then start to show you more things like that. So if I'm looking for a bookshelf, I'll start saving bookshelves that I like but are maybe not the right size, and then within a few days my Facebook Marketplace will just bring up more and more bookshelves. So that's really useful. And I will also save things that I love but don't need as a priority, and then I might go into my saved items and have a look to see if any of my saved items are still available. And if they've been available for 3 or 4 weeks, then I can go in with a really low offer and get things, for a lot cheaper. And the other thing I do is, if I am picking up something that's a priority, I'll then go into my saved items and say, is there anything within 5 minutes of this place that I've saved and didn't go because I couldn't be bothered to travel there, because it's not a priority, but it's maybe something that I like, because often for me it's the time of going to travel and pick something up. But if I'm like, okay, well, I'm already traveling to pick something up that I really, really need, so because I saved this item 3 weeks ago and it's still available and it's only just down the road, then I can combine the trips. I mean, that probably just makes me sound like a complete Facebook maniac. But it's definitely like
No, it makes you sound like a
strategy.
pro.
There's
Yeah,
strategy. And the other thing I'll do is if we're going on holiday or we're going somewhere in the UK, I might look up that location and see if there's anything local. Because
yeah,
obviously, you know, within you're only kind of you're restricted to your own area really within reason, aren't you? So if we are traveling somewhere, I might be like, oh, I wonder if there's anything in this city that we need for the house. So
yeah.
there's definitely lots of ways of doing it, and it generally involves a lot of scrolling. But definitely saving things that you like then means the algorithm will bring up stuff that you like, and that helps save time because it means you don't have to scroll through so much rubbish.
No, I love that. I'm so glad that I asked you for tips because those are genius, and now I will use those when I look on Facebook Marketplace. What are your favorite items or what's your favorite item that you've bought off of Facebook Marketplace, and then what's the worst item that you think you've probably bought off of Facebook Marketplace?
So my favorite item I bought was actually probably the shelves in the kitchen, which was a classic.
Mm.
Just saw them, loved them, jumped on them, didn't really look too much at the dimensions. And when they arrived, they were about 3 times bigger than I thought they would be. And at first I was like, oh my goodness, this is not going to work anywhere. And I was like, they're really beautiful and they were really cheap, but they were huge. But then when I kind of had a bit more of a look, they actually ended up working out really well at that size. And actually, it was like perfect. It was like they were made for the space that they're now in. So they're probably my favourite one. But there have definitely been things over the years that I have bought that haven't worked out so well. I bought some cinema chairs, which again I got because I was really quick. And the person who I got them from said she had about 20 messages within half an hour. And I just happened to get there first.
Ooh,
And I really liked them. But when I got them home and I started to upcycle them, they were covered in woodworm. And I really wanted them to be just plain wood. So the woodworm's quite obvious.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and for that reason, they haven't worked as well as I thought they would in this space. And they're maybe not so practical because they're like two wooden cinema chairs that they kind of flop up and down like cinema chairs do. And I thought they'd be
yeah.
great in our hallway. And they do look good, but they're just not actually that practical. They're maybe style over substance.
Hmm.
So that is one that maybe hasn't worked out so well. But I can
Yeah.
just resell them, and I'll get a little bit of money back. So it's not the end of the world.
One last question about your current house. What projects are you working on at the moment, and which ones are you most excited about?
We're just finishing our 2 bathrooms. So that is the bathroom that was like the shower behind the shower. And I'm
Yes.
really excited to have those back because we've been doing them since April. It's been quite an ongoing saga, so it's been really nice. They're just weeks away from being finished. It's just like all the snagging jobs to do. So that is what has taken up quite a bit of our time recently. And then the next project that we're doing is our hallway and living room floor. So we've just painted the living room,
Mm-hmm.
and the floor again was wooden floor when we moved in, but it was laid on top of carpet. So the floor bounced a
Mm.
lot, and which is sort of typical. The typical DIY we found in this house has been a lot of bodge jobs. So we've removed that floor, and at the moment we've just got black plastic floor down, which is horrible. But it's a sort of temporary measure. So in end of October, we're going to be laying down some proper wood floor, and that will just really make the house feel a lot more finished. So we're very excited to get that done. But we've
Yeah.
never laid floor before, so we'll see how it goes. It might still not be finished this time next year. We'll come back and do another podcast, and I'll be like, it's still not
Yes.
done.
I
But
would
yeah,
love
so
that.
yeah, that's a new thing that we'll be teaching ourselves how to do. So
How do you stop? Because I mentioned this 2 episodes ago, I think, that like we just replaced our kitchen countertops, and my husband and his dad are going to put in the backsplash, which he discovered last week that he hates tiling. So we'll see how that goes. Um, but now I'm like, well, it'd be really nice to. I mean, I do want to change the knobs, and I've wanted to change the knobs. So I'm like, oh, it'd be nice to change the knobs, and it would be nice to put in under cabinet lighting, and oh, it would really be really nice to change the flooring in the kitchen. How do you stop yourself from just keeping on going?
I don't. I do just keep going. I think so. Our kitchen, we did it like that. We were never going to replace our kitchen because we couldn't afford it. But then things started to break, and like you
Yeah,
say, it escalates because we're like, well, the floor is broken, so we need to take everything out to put down the floor because it had gone all damp underneath, and the tiles were all breaking. The boiler, the cooker, and everything are broken. So then we were like, okay, now we need to replace that, which then means we need to replace the tiles that were around it. So you're right,
yeah,
it does escalate. And that's why I think we can have all the best plans in the world. We can be really organized with budgets and to-do lists. But at the end of the day, you so often come across things that you're not expecting. So you have to be
yeah,
really flexible with your expectations, almost what you're hoping to achieve, because you end up spending budget on things you had no idea you were going to spend budget on, and then having to revise other plans and dreams for other spaces because you've not got the budget for that. So uh, we definitely, our kitchen completely spiraled, and now we kept the kitchen but we've upcycled it so much it looks like a completely different space.
hmm,
And we did do things like change the handles, and I changed the kickboards, but we did it over 2 years because we had never
yeah,
budgeted a new kitchen in. And even though we kept the units, there was so much other cost that went into other things, like the new floor and the new cooker and electrics and things like that. So I'm not very good at letting a space be finished, or rather, we've not really lived in a house long enough for that to happen, I guess.
mm,
I think spaces evolve as you use them, and as your family changes and grows or gets older and your needs change. There are things that I did
yeah,
in the kitchen that I've done recently that I wouldn't have done 2 years ago because my son would have just broken them, or would have just, he couldn't have
yeah,
access to those things. Like, I couldn't put a hanging rail on the cupboard because he would have just hung off it and broken it. Whereas now I'm like, yes, I
yeah,
can hang a towel and an oven glove on a hanging rail because he's old enough, on the most part, to understand when I say no. Not all the time, obviously, but
yeah,
so there are things that you can add as and when, and I don't really feel like a space is ever finished. It just evolves. I think if you're creative and if you enjoy spaces and you notice things, then you are just all, your brain just doesn't quite switch off. You're always just thinking of ways
mm,
you can improve spaces. I don't think you
yeah,
need. I don't think you need to encourage just doing it for the sake of doing it. But where you can think of, actually this would work better, or this would, we need to reorganize this space because our kids don't have the same toys they used to have, or there's definitely, yeah, reason, isn't there, for changing spaces.
yes.
But yeah.
And I would love to have gotten more into budget with you in this episode, but there's so much to talk about, I feel like. So I'm just grateful for the time that we've had. But uh, thank you for joining me and um, sharing kind of just a bit of your DIY journey and creating a home that you love, or creating homes, because you've done it 3 times now, that you love. I am confident that the listeners for this episode are going to really appreciate hearing from an actual professional DIYer. That it sounds stupid, but I think that's
I'm
what
not
you are.
professional.
um, so, so thank you, and maybe we can do this again uh, in in a year's time, and we'll see where everything's at and what you're working on at the moment then.
Yeah, I'd love
But
that.
thanks
Thank
so
you
much
so
for
much
being
for
here.
having me.
That was just incredible. I am so grateful to Hannah for being willing to join us, especially when the podcast is still so young. And I so appreciate just her honesty and openness when it comes to numbers and her processes and her approach. It's rare to find an influencer. I'm sure Hannah would cringe at me calling her that, but it's hard to find an influencer who's that honest and upfront when it comes to numbers. So that's a real gift. And those Facebook Marketplace tips, those are amazing. Anyway, that is it for this week's episode. I know it was a long one, so thank you for bearing with us. I will see you again in 2 weeks' time. Bye for now.